Committee member Richard Sells, who've met him before on 2 previous occasions for the last 2 years, and this is the third of the trilogy on, as you can see, Ironman Wilkinson, King of the Ironmasters. We are hoping to persuade Richard to distill his 3 talks in an article in the journal next December. Keep your eyes open for that as well. You what I said, Richard? Make sure you can distill it for an article in the journal.
Okay.
So over to you, Richard.
Okay, well, thank you. Yes, it'll be quite a job to distill it down to that. Really, we'll see how we get on. Right, well, welcome to part 3 of John Wilkinson. Now, just as a reminder, this talk is also about the first 5 key steps in the Industrial Revolution that led to our soft, secure, and cushy, luxurious lives of today, in only 300 years after 6,000 years of civilization. How Wilkinson played a key part in putting the grace into Great Britain, how religion and politics affected the Industrial Revolution, welfare, education, and to slavery being abolished, the importance of coke in the Industrial Revolution and our modern lives. Where we ended in part 2 and a starting point for part 3. Part 2 of the talk included Wilkinson's Braidley Ironworks and his amazingly accurate machine tools, the Wilkinson Blue plaque at Wilkinson School, Braidley, the BCN Canal, Wilkinson being the father of the Black Country and his contributions to the Black BCN Canal that led to unprecedented growth of trade in the Black Country and Birmingham. How nonconformists fought for the abolishment of slavery and endangered themselves. This talk also starts with the building of the Iron Bridge, which was the passion of architect William Thomas Pritchard and Wilkinson, even if the Wilkinson did not build himself for a number of reasons, which I will go through. It was how Wilkinson started getting his name Iron Man Wilkinson, which was ahead of his time, wanting an iron bridge to use as an advert for the industry in the area, and still is the worldwide iconic image of the area today, around 250 years later. So there we are, the first ribs raised in 1781. That nice picture of the Iron Bridge painted by William Williams. Now there's a popular demand for the bridge to replace the ferries over the River Severn between the 2 busy industrial areas of Bensall, Jackville and Calcutta on the Mersey side to Coalbrookdale and Madeley on the other side. There were 6 ferries and as many miles, and they could be dangerous in times of floods and resulted in loss of life. So there was a need for a substantial bridge between the bridges of Bridgnorth and Buildwas for people as well as goods. In fact, the Iron Bridge is wide enough for 2 cars, 2 footpaths, which seems surprisingly substantial for those times. In 1773, 6 years before the start of the Iron Bridge, Wilkinson and Pritchard were in conversations about the bridge. At this time, they'd known each other for at least 17 years, since November 1756, when Pritchard had prepared the memorial for Wilkinson's wife, Anne Maudsley, at St. Charles Church, Wrexham, and the fireplace. Later, he did other work for Wilkinson at his Bursley home, the lawns, including a fireplace. 1756 comes a surprisingly early date, considering New Building was only established in 1757. So one wonders how they became acquainted so early. 1773 was a formal meeting of the proposers of Abraham Canadine's house at Bursley. He was a cooper, probably an innkeeper. At this time, Wilkinson was 45, Pritchard was 50, however, Darby was only 23. 2 years later, in 1775, Darby agreed to build a bridge out of iron and defray all expenses. Unfortunately, it appears that his excessive keenness to this young man to build a bridge, he underquoted at £3,150. Unfortunately, it cost over £6,000, and it sent him to direct debt, from which he had not recovered when he died at the age of 39. His grandfather, Abraham Darby, also died at 39, and one wonders if it's connected with the working in the dusty, dirty conditions of the day. By 1775, Pritchard had finalised the plan for the bridge. March 1776, The Act was obtained from Parliament, and now 8 of the original 13 investors were from Broseley side of the river. These are the subscribers. So you see there's John Wilkinson at the top. So Abraham Darby's John Wilkinson was Abraham Darby and Edward Blakeaway. So they're the sort of main contributors. Note, only 2 of these investors were from the Coalbrookdale side of the river, and the first meeting was held in Broseley, which is something that seemed to get overlooked. Act of Parliament proposal. Thomas Addenbrooke, a lawyer and builder, was the secretary for the bridge and made the proposal to get the Act of Parliament to build the bridge. Mr. Harries, a London barrister, also assisted in the proposal. Eventually, Wilkinson sold his shares in the bridge to Derby on condition it would be only built out of iron and within 2 years. This tactic helped to ensure the bridge would happen at a reasonable time after all the delays and uncertainty. As explained previously, Wilkinson had many other things to get on with and was probably happy for Derby to build the bridge at a bargain price. Derby was a local up-and-coming artisan who could be trusted to do the job while Wilkinson busied himself with other projects. Also at the time, William Reynolds, a fellow Quaker, was managing Coalbrookdale up until 1796, so he would be the backup to Derby III. At the time, why wouldn't Wilkinson want to build a bridge? At the time, he was very busy with more profitable activities which were worth summarising to clarify the dynamism of the Wilkinson. 1774, he was finalising his cannon patent and making cannon. 1775, he was developing his machine tool for the Baltimore engine, and then supplying cylinders for the Baltimore engines, which was a profitable business. 1776, Wilkins was applying Baltimore engines to his own forges, slitting and rolling mills, especially at Braidley, where he had begun to make boilers and develop iron puddling to make wrought iron, which is similar to today's mild steel. 1775 to 1783, he was heavily involved with the profitable business of cannon manufacture, e.g. for the war against the American Revolution, which ran from 1775 to 1783. And effectively, it was Britain versus America, France, Netherlands, and Spain. Also, the whole of the Navy and then the East India Company ships were now being sheathed in copper for the war from the only open cast copper mine, Mona copper mine on Anglesey, which was glutting the market with copper. And Wilkinson had shares in it, as well as being a supplier of iron goods and engines to the copper mines. Wilkinson was also supplying scrap iron to Anglesey to use in the extraction of copper from its ore. Because the concentration of copper in ore is so low, at 0.1 to 5%, it was dissolved out of the pulverized ore using sulfuric acid to form a copper sulfate solution. When iron was added to the solution, copper was precipitated and could then be melted into a solid mass. This leaves a solution of ferrous sulfate instead of copper sulfate. You may remember at school when you put an iron nail in a blue copper sulfate solution, the nail becomes plated in copper. I need a drink. 1777, Wilkinson was supplying 40 miles of pipe to the Paris water, along with engine parts. Then 1781, the year the Iron Bridge was completed, a great banquet was held in his honour at the Paris City Hall. Paris Water was being run by the Perrier brothers, who were rich, powerful men who became involved with the French Revolution. The pipes had to be escorted by the French Navy to ensure that security and required certification. This 4-year task alone must be very demanding technically, commercially, and logistically. 1777, he was selling and supplying the Cornish miners with their first Baltimore engine and other parts such as valves and track valves. Track valves allow fluid to flow in one direction only. The efficiency of the Baltimore engine was very important to the Cornish miners to reduce their costs because coal was so expensive to transport to Cornwall, and Cornwall had no coal deposits themselves. In 1777, Wilkinson was in the process of buying Castle Head Estate near Lindale, Cumbria, for his retirement home and making early proposals for the Lancaster Canal. Derby had put in, why would Wilkinson want to build the Down Bridge? Derby had put in a very unprofitable quote to build the bridge, so it was not worthwhile to complete. And presumably he thought he could trust this young artisan to do what he wanted, that was to build an iron bridge. At the time, the Coalbrookdale works was being managed by William Reynolds, which he did up to 1796. This was because Abraham Derby II died in March 1763 when Derby III was only 13. So he was apprenticed to Coalbrookdale Works while William Reynolds managed Coalbrookdale. So when, in 1779, the bridge building began, Coalbrookdale was being managed by William Reynolds, which would have left time for Derby to tackle the building of the iron bridge and make his name. Unfortunately, Derby III died at age 39 in 17, only 10 years after starting the bridge, so it appears he never took over full management of Coalbrookdale. Wilkinson's Willey Ironworks at Broseley connected with the River Severn at Willey Wharf, which was about 3 miles downstream from the proposed iron bridge site. Consequently, transporting materials upstream would not have been helpful in supplying the bridge building. Wilkinson's large number of projects and their widespread geography must have involved a lot of travelling time, so he would not have had time to build the bridge while he was managing more profitable work. Delegation of work and responsibility must have become second nature to Wilkinson. So it would have suited Wilkinson to effectively leave the construction of the bridge to Abraham Derby III while he ran his expanding empire. So you can see, so there's Willey Railway going there, and just across here you've got Sutton Maddock, and then got to go all the way up here to Ironbridge, so it's quite a long way up. We've got Broseley here. Right, and you can, so these are all, we've got the river there, and so there's all these industrial areas need to communicate, and beyond, of course, to other areas to supply them, so they all need to cross the river. This is Builders Bridge, was built in 1796 by Thomas Telford, was the first of many bridges. It was a cast iron bridge built 14 years after the Iron Bridge. It survived many floods until it was replaced in 1905. Then that bridge was replaced in 1992. So the Iron Bridge is the only 18th century iron bridge to survive. In 1776, 3 years before the first ribs were raised, 1779, Samuel Moore reported spending, this is about Wilkinson's commitment to the bridge. So Samuel Moore reported spending a week with Wilkinson at his Broseley home and his Willey Ironworks. They've been friends for 20 years at this time. They spent a year looking for a site for the iron bridge, which is when Moore said he became clear on Wilkinson's advocacy for the bridge. I should explain that the Secretary of the RSA is the top position and involved annual elections, which Moore won in spite of smear campaigns. This was because Moore's hard work and popularity, and he kept the position for 30 years from 1769 to his death in 1799. Prior to this, Moore had been chairman of all the main committees, including chemistry. He also used to be called as a witness to many high-profile trials, so we're talking about a high-caliber guy here. Unfortunately, Pritchard died 21st of December 1777, age 54, and the site work for the bridge had barely begun. He'd been ill for over a year. Choice of materials for the iron bridge. It was Wilkinson's idea with his friend, architect Farners Pritchard, to have the bridge built between Broseley and what was then Madeley Wood, made wholly from iron. This was because Wilkinson wanted it as to be an advertisement for the industry in the area, which had already become a tourist attraction. 250 years later, the Iron Bridge is the world icon for the area that still generates an income for the area through the tourist trade. That's genius. However, in spite of everything, including letters, etc., to the English heritage, they still do not mention Wilkinson on their Iron Bridge information board. You may remember in the earlier talk, we talked about the Lucy Worsley effect in part one, that people will just tell you what they want you to know and no more, or not even strictly what is correct. Happily, IGMT does have a display stand about Wilkinson and the Museum of Iron, and a smaller information board in the toll house on the bridge. So there's a Tontine Hotel opposite the Iron Bridge, built for the tourists coming to see the Iron Bridge. Quite a splendid building, really. So who built the Tontine? This notice board on Tontine Hotel says how the hotel was built 3 years after the bridge in 1784 to accommodate visitors to see the Iron Bridge. Those involved were Abraham Darby, Samuel Darby, William and Richard Reynolds, John Wilkinson, Joseph Rathbone, and others who had connections with the building of the bridge. So, not content with wanting to attract visitors and business with the Iron Bridge, the Conservatives built a hotel to accommodate them. A Tontine agreement is when subscribers agree for their share to be shared between survivors, and when they die, so that's the last one inherits all. But this Tontine was not completed. Wilkinson had a lot of opposition from people who were worried about this new use of iron because they still wanted to build a bridge from stone or wood. In fact, Abraham Darby's commitment to build a bridge with iron was rescinded by a committee meeting on the 15th of May 1776. The committee advertised for someone to build it out of wood, stone or brick, but without success. Then on the 24th of July 1776, the committee agreed to use iron. On the 1st of October 1776, Wilkinson and Leonard Jennings sold their shares to Abraham Darby III on the condition the bridge was made out of iron and in 2 years. Prior to this, there had been delays due to indecision. It appears Wilkinson was trying to avoid more delay, as well as to tie down the decision to use iron. So Wilkinson got his way, but not without being named Iron Lad Wilkinson. Note, neither Pritchard nor Darby were ever named Iron Lad, which again speaks for itself. That is, it was Wilkinson's driving ambition to have the bridge made out of iron, whether he built it himself or not. When Samuel Moore came to see the plans for the bridge in 1760, it was Wilkinson he met up with, not Pritchard or Darby. Once Wilkinson had got Darby III's commitment to build the Iron Bridge out of iron, it left Wilkinson free to get on with many projects, as discussed earlier. The process of using coke to smelt iron is choice of materials for the Iron Bridge and the Industrial Revolution. The process of using coke to smelt iron is usually attributed to Abraham Darby I in 1709 at Coalbrookdale. The use of coke was the first step in the Industrial Revolution because the abundant supply of coke or coal enabled the smelting of very, very large quantities of iron. These larger quantities of fuel and coke were necessary for making the many goods and machines. Oops. So, where are we? Choice. Very, very large quantities of iron. These larger supplies of fuel and coke were necessary for making the many goods and machines that were needed for the Industrial Revolution. There would not have been remotely enough trees to supply charcoal for the Industrial Revolution, quite apart from the greenhouse effect due to the loss of trees. In the 18th century, iron production was only 0.001% of today's production, and yet we are already running out of trees in the 18th century. Even in 1665, Dudley said that we were running out of trees, and that we also needed them for buildings and ships. It was cheaper to make iron with coke than with charcoal, so it was more feasible to use iron for the bridge, even if it was untried. However, it still came as a surprise to many, and consequently, Wilkinson was thought to be iron mad. Iron is a very abundant and versatile metal, so it's been adapted for many different products and uses, which were necessary for the Industrial Revolution. Today, more appropriate materials and new materials have replaced cast iron and wrought iron or mild steel as it is today, e.g. plastic, aluminium, zinc, etc. Mild steel is a soft and tough malleable compared to cast iron, which is brittle. Also, there's a variety of stainless steels for knives, forks, surgery equipment, saucepans, etc. This is instead of using carbon steels that go rusty and need polishing. Stainless is also used in car exhausts and bright trim parts for cars, etc. Other irons made since then include several types of cast iron and cast steel, also a great variety of engineering steels for car parts, etc. Also, high-speed tool steel for cutting metals. HSSs can maintain their hardness and sharpness at high cutting speeds and temperatures. Special steel for press tools for shaping sheet steel, car panels, tin cans, toys, cabinets, etc. Due to the brittleness of cast iron, it needs to be kept in compression. However, some tension is applied to the cast iron brackets on the Tay Bridge, so it failed in a severe storm in 1879, which resulted in the deaths of 75 people. Thereafter, the safety factor of the bridge was greatly increased, such as for the Firth or Forth Bridge in 1890. This bridge is considered to be the landmark for the development of railway civil engineering. It was the first major structure in Britain to be made out of steel. By this time, steel was much cheaper due to the Bessemer process that I will describe later. That's a remarkable process. After the scare of the Tay Bridge and the Forth Road Bridge was over, the engine that's just the Forth Bridge, sorry. Engineering with heavy gauge sections of high strength to ensure no further chances of failure. Special steels have been developed for bridges and buildings today for strength, economy, toughness, instead of cast iron and mild steel. In the 20th century, more suitable materials became available to replace iron, which was being used as a substitute material because it was cheap and nothing else was available. As a special toughened cast iron that could even be used for engine crankshafts. However, grey cast iron that was used in the 18th century is still used for engine cylinders, even for the Bugatti Veyron. However, it is a special cast iron. The Bugatti costs between 800,000 and 2.7 million, and it has grey cast iron cylinders. These new materials include plastic for buckets, bowls, rainwater goods, gutters, electrical goods, car parts, windows, etc. So what we're talking about, I'm just really explaining how, iron in those days was a substitute material, and today we replaced it with better things. But it was that's why there's such a high demand for it. Various aluminium alloys for aircraft construction, engine crankcases, die casting, pistons, pots, pans, aluminium foil, windows, etc. Zinc alloys for low-cost die casting, such as toys and spelter for ornaments, etc. Zinc is also used for galvanizing to stop iron rusting, e.g. corrugated sheets, iron brackets, etc. Right, Abraham Darwin and the use of coke. It could be argued that coke for smelting iron was a process waiting to happen rather than a discovery, because coke had already been used by the maltsters as early as 1600. In fact, Darwin I would have become familiar with coke in his apprenticeship in Birmingham with the Quaker Jonathan Freeth, a maker of brass malt mills used in brewing. Coke was used to heat the kilns to dry the malt without tainting the beer. After his apprenticeship, Darby moved to a Bristol brass company, where he and a group of Quakers were making brass pots and pans. It's said that initially Darby intended making brass products at Coalbrookdale rather than iron goods. Perhaps this was because coal was known to have a low sulphur content and made good coke, and maybe he had pots in mind anyway, iron pots, which would be much cheaper. Consequently, it must be very tempting to use coke to make iron when he was surrounded by the iron making industry, and maybe he was running low in brass. Fortunately, he had a good quality coal for coking with low sulfur and phosphorus, so it worked out for his cast iron. However, he had difficulty in casting pots and pans until 1707, when he submitted a patent to Queen Anne to sand-cast thin-walled iron pots for cooking, etc., which made them lighter as well as cheaper. Also, iron could be cheaper than brass, which made pots by that was made into pots by a battering process, which battering plus hammering plus heat process. Don't know much about it. It sounds well, not a lot. This battering process was replaced by casting in a mould similar to Darby's method at around the same time as Darby brought out his patent. Uh, Dud Dudley was a relative of Abraham Darby, so he must have known about Dud Dudley's patent, Metal and Martis of 1665, which talks about making iron using coal. But there were three secrets which he does not divulge in his patent, but he said he told them to three trusted people. These secrets, no doubt, involved the use of coke, because he was apparently, which was already a well-known fuel in the water industry. See copies of Metal and Martis in the Dudley Archives, the IGMT Museum of Iron, which has one, which is very like it could have been Dud's copy or Abraham Darby's copy of Metal and Martis. It must have been an inspiration for him. Dud was a colonel in the King Charles II's Royalist Army during the Civil War, and his iron had passed tests in the Tower of London. Also, he made muskets, carbines, and cannon for King Charles II. So his iron must have been okay. However, he was working in very difficult times with prejudice and sabotage, etc. Also, he was on the wrong side in the Civil War. So after 40 years, he probably just gave up, as discussed in part one. As a result of these factors, such as the world's first iron bridge and the use of coke, as well as coal, China, brick and industries, etc., that grew out of it, the Severn Valley was given World Heritage status by UNESCO. However, without the Iron Bridge and the support of the Derby family, the Iron Bridge Gorge Museum Trust may never have been formed, and the Iron Bridge district would not have benefited from the tourist trade, etc., which helped it to recover from being a rundown area after the industry had gone. Also, Telford Development Corporation ended up being very supportive in the light of the evidence and potential benefits. A talk by Michael Darby of the Abraham Darby dynasty indicates that it took some hard work on the part of his father, Lady de Boucherie of Dudmaster Hall was a relative, and others to stop the furnace at Colbrookdale being filled in and to get the IGMT formed. No doubt the Iron Bridge played a key part in the proposal, and without it, IGMT may never have come about, and the Colbrookdale would remain undeveloped after the decline of industry in the area, like so many others. For example, Wilkinson's Braidley Ironworks was bulldozed in 1996, and a large housing estate, etc., was built on the site. I believe the company that bulldozed Braidley site is the same one that has already flattened a lot of Wilkinson's Brumbo Ironworks in Wrexham. Tourism and the Iron Bridge. Much of the industry is gone today, but the history and the Iron Bridge still earn a district income by attracting tourists to the IGMT, in the same way as Elvis Presley, a royal family, Robert Burns, Shakespeare, etc. Wilkinson wanted the Iron Bridge as an advert for the area, a remarkable it still is the iconic worldwide image that attracts tourist images and image to the area today. Another masterly stroke by Wilkinson, who said he was mad. Engine economy, Wilkinson and the copper miners. The cost of coal was a particular problem for the Cornish miners because they had no local coal mines, and it was costly to transport coal into the area by sea, pack horses, horse, cart, etc. So Baltimore engines were of particular interest because they were 4 times as efficient as Newcomen engines. Consequently, the Baltimore engines were a godsend to the copper miners, who bought many of them. John Wilkinson was the first person to sell a Baltimore engine to the Cornish miners, and that was at Wheel Busy Mine between Redruth and Truro in 1777. Then there was the Chasewater Mine in 1778, 1779 the Treshaven Mine, and Consolidated Mines, United Mines, North Down Mines, the Poldice Mines. Previously, they'd had two new combine engines in the 1760s with 66 inches cylinders, which were much greater than necessary with a Bolton-Watt engine, which were 4 times as efficient. These are the ruins of the Poldice Mine in Coldham still exist. Copper, tin, and arsenic were mined. You can see, there are. So this is chimney off beam engine or whatever. Yeah. Poldice mine turned from being metals to arsenic because there was a demand as a pesticide, but levels of arsenic contamination in the soil made it difficult for the plant life was growing. Conclusions. After visiting a number of mines and museums, I found no mention of Wilkinson or Bolton Watt, or perhaps much at all before 1800. It's like the Lucy Worsley effect again. They only tell you what they want you to know. It seems engineering began with Richard Trevithick. This looks like the remains of a mine. Maybe it's a ventilation hole. There was no labelling or indication of what this was, not even a warning. The Poldice mine still looks bare, presumably because of the traces of arsenic from mining. Wheel Pivot, an engine in Cornwall, with an engine removed, of course. Actually, there are loads of empty, disused engine houses everywhere. Some have been made into houses. In some cases, arsenic could be an issue in the ground. This 1876 rotating engine at Wheel Pivot was for stamping or crushing the ore. However, eventually the rotative engine was replaced by a gas or oil engine. The ore had to be crushed to aid the refining process and concentration of the ore to enable the extraction of copper or whatever. Copper coinage or trade tokens or condos. From 1775, tokens were born out of necessity because the government did not mint any halfpenny, half pennies or pennies copper coinage until 1821. So there was not sufficient coinage to pay the working man. Consequently, trade tokens were issued by some business people so that they could pay their workforce. These included Wilkinson, Matthew Bolton, Thomas Williams, the Copper King, who Wilkinson had shares in the Paris copper mine in Anglesey. Anglesey was the only open cast mine and was able to supply the cheapest copper ore to make the copper sheets and bolts to sheathe the Navy's copper-bottomed ships as well as tokens. The ore was processed into copper at their smelters in Swansea and Liverpool. The practice of making copper tokens went on until 1798, when the government began minting more coinage at the Tower of London, or allowed other people to make coin of their own, such as Matthew Bolton at his famous Soho works in Birmingham, who used steam-powered press developed in 1788. There were pennies, halfpennies, and farthings. Today, copper coins are plated steel and are magnetic if you ever tested any. The collecting of trade tokens was popularised by James Condor around 1800, so they became also named as condos. The first real copper coins were experimental farthings and halfpennies that emerged in 1672 in King Charles II's reign. Another source said it was 1603 to 1625, and their copper value was about half the face value. Actually, there's a long, complicated history to coin manufacture. Coins of the realm had the monarch's head on one side, and Wilkinson was the only commoner who used his own head on his tokens. Consequently, a satirical vase was written in London magazine in 1787 about having his own brazen image on the coins. Perhaps it was just a witty remark. Really, it should be argued that it was a logical sign of his honesty and integrity that he used his own image to back the value of this coinage in the same way as the king was backing his coinage. Wilkinson's tokens were made by the ton from 1787 to 1798. He had his own head on one side. On the other side, in this case, the 1793 token, he had a forge hammer. The tokens were redeemable at his banks and were stamped around the edge Willie Brady Version, or London, Dublin, Lancaster and Bristol. Wilkinson had interest in 5 banks, namely Brumbo, Ironbridge, Iton Reynolds, and Wilkinson and Shrewsbury, Bradley Ironworks, Wilkinson and Company Limited, Wilston, Wilkinson and Starton, Smith and Smith, Union Street, Birmingham. This 1792 Wilkinson half-penny toy code shows Vulcan hammering at his anvil and the brig ship here. It's probably the Mary, which was Wilkinson's ship. Stamped around the edge is payable at Lancaster, London or Bristol. The world's first iron boat, 6th of July 1787. Iron plates for the iron boat were transported down the 3-mile iron railway from New Willey to Willey Wharf on the River Severn, where they were assembled under the supervision of John Jones, who was the foreman at Wilkinson's New Willey Ironworks. The boat was 70 foot long, 6 foot 8.5 inches wide, and was very similar to today's narrowboats. Reference Wilkinson's letter to James Stockwell in 14th July 1707. There was some considerable publicity to the launching because it was probably believed that an iron boat would not float, so crowds came to see it sink. In the event, it was a perfectly functioning boat with a draft of 8 to 9 inches. So it's another example of Wilkinson showing he was not mad, but instead he was a far-sighted visionary engineer and inventor. Cannon were fired to celebrate and announce a success to all in earshot. By the end of July 1787, the boat had delivered 22 tons of iron to Birmingham via the Worcester and Staffs Canal and the Birmingham Canal Navigations, which meet at Orthley Junction behind Aldersley Stadium in Wolverhampton. The second iron boat was launched from Bradley Ironworks onto the Birmingham Canal, the BCM, that ran around the side of Wilkinson's Bradley Ironworks. Today, that part of the canal is known as the Wednesbury Loop, due to the straightening and shortening of the VCM by Thomas Telford, who built an alternative shortcut to avoid the loop around Wilkinson's Bradley Ironworks and other wriggles. Basically halved the length of it, actually. But he had to put a lot of locks in. Currently, this arm finishes at the Canal and River Trust Lockgates Works on Bradley Lane, which is on the opposite side of the canal from Wilkinson's primary school and the Old Bush pub. However, the inland, which was there in the Old Bush pub was there in Wilkinson's day, actually. However, the Inland Waterway Association are proposing having the Bradley Arm over Weddell Wind reopened in conjunction with Walsall, Dudley and Sandwell councils. However, things seem to be a bit quiet about it. I think it's a bit expensive and difficult, actually. I wonder if it's a pipe dream. A major problem is that the canal is now cut off by the Brady Lane at the CRT workshops. There you are. So that's the end of the canal, and so there's the end of the canal, and this is Bradley Lane here. And you go over Bradley Lane, over the houses, you come to Weddell Wind, which is a common. It's actually, you can still see where the canal was, where the locks were, and it's absolutely riddled with coal mines. Right, okay. And you can actually sort of see where the canal is here, going through here. So the Wilkinson School's actually here now. This is Wilkinson Avenue up here. In the distance is the here is the pottery of Wilkinson's, and there's another ironworks here, and there's a middle one, and this is the Moorfields pottery. Typical names, street names are Clark's Row, Shropshire Row, Worksman Road, and Salop Street. for people from Shropshire. Up to 5,000 people were employed here. Wilkinson's house is actually sort of around this way somewhere. So is Brady Lane. It passes out of sight. So there we are. This is the whoops, what's the day? What am I doing here? Whoops, going the wrong way here. What have I done here? Oh, right, that's better. Okay. Okay, that's the viewing point for the painting there. And here you've got Wilkinson's Braidley Hall and Gardens. There's the Old Bush Pub here, the CRT workshop here, and that's where the canal ends today. That was a map in 1836. And so this is Weddell Wind here. There's lots of coal mines, as I said. And here you've got Wilkinson's Pottery, Brady Lane, Lower Works. Today this area is the playing fields. And all the rest of it is a 1960s housing estate. Anyway, about 2 months later, after the third and fourth boats, 2 months later, on the 1st of September 1787, a third boat was launched on the Birmingham Canal via the Braidley Arm at Wilkinson's Braidley Ironworks. On the 20th of October 1787, a fourth iron boat was launched, and this was a 40-ton boat for the River Severn. Needless to say, iron boats eventually became the norm and heralded greater safety, especially at sea in the 1800s, and wooden sailing boats began to be phased out. Grimber Ironworks, established 1796. Grimber is in Wrexham, not far from Bersham Ironworks, which Wilkinson's father had taken over 43 years earlier in 1753. Grimber was 872 acres of land, which John mined, farmed, and converted 150 acres of wild heathland to agriculture. Part of the Grimber Ironworks still exists today, including the #1 blast furnace, which used for 98 years from 1796 to 1894. There were many coal mines on the estate to supply ironworks, as well as deposits of ironstone. The good news is that Grimber and the fossil forest next to it is being redeveloped at a cost of £8.1 million. More about that later. So this is the drawing of old #1 furnace as it was. This is a picture I took some years ago of, you can see in the centre you've got some #1 again. There's a pair of cupolas here which built in 1952, and so Wilkinson had painted the cupola in 1794. Yes, and anyway, not far to the left of here, not far away at all, is this 300-million-year-old fossil forest. SSI fossil forest, I should add. Okay, old #1 again. Cupolas based on Wilkinson's patent of 1794. They were the first furnaces to be cased in iron. These cupolas are about 20 foot higher than they appear because they're viewed from the charging platform. See, the charging platform is here, and that's the hole. And these here are spark arresters to help it in complying with the Clean Air Acts of the 1950s. Cupolas were used for remelting metal and improving the quality and composition of iron. On top are spark arresters to enable them to comply with the Clean Air Act. This cupola furnace is painted of 1794. Is actually cast in cannonballs. Cupolas were very efficient, but are used much less today because of air pollution. And typically, all heights up to 20 metres. However, there is still one in operation at the IGMT's Bristol Museum, and the iron shell of another one is lying on its side in the car park. Wilkinson's cupolas were the backbone of industry, the founding industry, and they've been used all over the world since 1794 because of their simplicity and efficiency. At one time, there were probably hundreds in the Black Country until the Clean Act of 1956. They could be maintained easily because the two halves of the hinged steel bottom could be dropped out to allow the dust of the slag and dross from the melting campaign to be removed, so that the furnace lining, etc., could be repaired, patched up as necessary for the next campaign. The motor industry used cupolas for melting scrap iron and pig iron to make cast iron, brakes, drums, discs, engines, gearboxes, casings, cylinder linings, etc. There are also cupolas at James Bridge, Walsall, which were used for melting and refining of electrode copper. Cupola furnace is still in use at Bristol, which I've said, or it was until recently. Right, here we've got, so at Brimber, there's these large moulds for casting blocks of steel from the cupolas, which are then rolled into strip or bars. Other plant near Brimber was the Penrose colliery engine house, not shown, and so bottle kiln for the lead smelter shown below. And was the Brimber water pool for the ironworks. They were actually pool for the ironworks. Brimber Hall was one of Wilkinson's 6 homes. Inigo Jones is said to be the architect of part of it at least, and it was completed in 1624, but it was demolished for mining in 1973, and is said to be a great architectural loss to Wales. Brimber Hall completed 1624. One story is that Inigo Jones, who was of Welsh descent, was born there, and eventually he designed part of it. Another story, he was born in Smithfield, London. Inigo Jones of 1573 to 1652 is said to be the first significant architect in the modern period in England and Wales. Sometime before 1603, a rich patron had sent him to Italy to study design, and he designed the banqueting house in Whitehall and the Queen's House and Covent Gardens. History of manufacturing at Brimber. Coal from 1400, lead from 1790, iron from 1796, as John Wilkinson's #1 furnace, steel from 1883, which were Wilkinson's works as well, lime from Frith mines, and lime kilns to control the furnace to enable the ground to be cultivated. Right, we mentioned that before. Eventually, 3 Baltimore engines from Brimber went to the Taylor Ready colliery, which was wet, but the pumps worked well. So a shot of Brimber blast furnace about 1902. Another one is we're on a guided tour here of Brimber with 2 retired staff of the Brimber Ironworks. The man in the centre is a sightseer from the Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas. The chap in red is suffering from an industrial accident at Brimber when a lorry squashed him against the wall. Development of Brimber Ironworks and the 300-million-year-old fossil forest. By the way, the Y in Brimber pronounced something like a U in Jumbo. Hopefully, the development of the Brimber will enable Wilkinson's achievements to be publicised and his name raised to being virtually unknown to the same level as his contemporaries like the Darbys, Richard Trevithick, George and Robert Stevenson, John Smeaton, James Watt, Matthew Bolton, or it could even be argued the level of Nelson and Wellington. Brimber was the last of the Wilkinson's 7 ironworks to be kept in operation after Wilkinson's death in 1808. Remarkably, Wilkinson's #1 blast furnace is still there, as we mentioned before. Various people and companies ran Brimber after Wilkinson's death in 1808 until 1990, and these included GKN, British Steel, and finally United Steels Group, who shut it down even though it was the only company in the group making a profit. At that time, it was making high-quality electrically melted steels for the air industry, including Rolls-Royce, made the situation even more frustrating for the employees. One of the employees in 1990 was the mill manager, Colin Davis, still actively involved in the Brimber Heritage Trust. Since 1990, Brimber's development as a historical site has been pursued by the Brimber Heritage Trust. The trust began as an informal group of employees who, with the help of professionals, developed a plan for 2012. However, the plan has been delayed due to many difficulties, but eventually work started in September 2024 and is expected to be completed in 2026. Note, this 300-year-old fossil forest is twice as old as the Cretaceous period of the dinosaurs. 8.1 million are allotted to the plan that includes renovation of the iron and steel works, various public facilities as school, shopping centre, doctor's surgery, cycleways and pathways. Also, the preservation of the 300-million-year-old SSI fossil forest, which is world importance, and that will receive £4.1 million of the fund. The fossil forest today is one of only 6 in the world and is the most accessible one, according to Barry Thomas, who is a paleontologist at Aberystwyth University. Fortunately, the fossil forest has been preserved underground by a geological fault. However, before being exposed, the fossils will need to be protected from the weather by a building, which will also protect the paleontologists as they work. Members of the public will also be able to watch the paleontologists at work. Some years ago, fossils had already been recovered and had been stored undercover. However, when the full significance of the site was recognised, the work was stopped until a building could be built over the site. So there's some of the fossils waiting attention in the machine shop. You see there's some there which are actually pretty weird. I have got some much better pictures, but these are like tree trunks here, and there's one that's taller than that, which is demonstrated there. I understand the fossil forest enthusiast Peter Appleton led the way, and his house became crammed with fossils. Be there, actually. It is. These are more fossil forests waiting attention in the machine shop. Financing and development of the Iron Bridge of Brimber Ironworks and the fossil forest. To finance the work at Brimber Heritage will receive £8.1 million from the National Lottery Heritage Fund, the National Lottery Community Fund. Those involved are the Brimber Developments Limited, who own the land and have agreed a 25-year lease on 25 acres of 440 acres that was purchased in 1994. The Wrexham County Council is involved, Welsh Government, Cadw, and Natural Resources of Wales. Also involved are professors, local councillors, many members of the community, including former employees who were instrumental in starting Brimber Heritage Trust, such as the former mill manager, Colin Davis. Further details can be seen by Googling Brimber Heritage Trust. Hopefully the Brimber Heritage and Fossil Forest will provide spin-off benefits to other historic sites in the area, such as mineral lead mines that were renovated to a very high standard but are now neglected. The walk through Plaspower Woods at Woodland Trust goes between the weir at Wilkinson's West Bersham Works to another weir, then to Offers Dyke, 1785, the Nant Mill Centre, and then the mineral lead mines 2.5 kilometres away. The track was once Wilkinson's Wagon Way and is on the Gurdog Valley Trail that was used for taking limestone and ore to Wilkinson's blast furnace at West Bersham. A good time to go might be in the spring to get the additional benefit of the snowdrops and bluebells. Wilkinson's West Bersham Ironworks is now neglected and needs attention. The Wrexham Museum, well, it's sort of going along all right. One of the sad things as well is this Bersham Museum, Bersham Heritage Museum, I should say it is. It's absolutely crammed with artefacts and should be reopened. In fact, there's a group the Rosie did visit quite some years ago. See the following slides. So this is the Mersham Heritage Museum, closed about 10 years ago. It was created when financed by the much larger and wealthier Druid County Council. It shows a horse deer on the front. Artifacts include Isaac Wilkinson's patented smoothing iron, which is shown in part one of my talk. The iron, this iron slug is heated up, and then this door is lifted, and you just pop it in there, and that heats the iron. I've seen a few around actually, history exhibitions and things. Okay. Also, still all Bersham Heritage Museum continued. These are two pipes left over from Wilkinson's 40 miles of pipes that were made for the Paris water supply. They're actually marked really, as in Wilkinson's Newbury Ironworks at Broseley. There's a collection of Wilkinson tokens. This is part of a model of Bersham. A model of a beam engine. This is a pilot boring bar from a Wilkinson boring machine. I understand there's a Wilkinson boring machine stored away in the cellars at London Science Museum. However, they claim it's too heavy for their floors, so it's not displayed. It seems a great shame because they're absolutely overboard with James Watt. But Wilkinson, you have a problem finding anything for that at all. It would probably be best if all these artifacts could be moved to Brimlow. Actually, the building's a nice building there, but it's not really relevant to the history. Development of Brimlow Ironworks and the 300 million year old forest. At my first presentation, we had two visitors from Wrexham, Brian Bestie of Brimlow Heritage Trust and Jonathan Gammon of the Wrexham Museum, who's currently developing the Welsh Museum of Football. Brian uses the Who Was John Ironman Wilkinson leaflet for his guided tours on the Brimlow Open Days and the Bersham Ironworks. Unfortunately, access to Brimlow site is now very restricted due to the work being carried out. Whilst we're talking about the leaflets, there are some leaflets down the front here. There's also some other little leaflets there giving you websites to look up. So you can Google my first talk and see it on the internet. You can also see, tells you about where to go to see more about Brimlow. And it tells you how to see the leaflet on the Broseley website. Okay, so there we are. It's a boring bar, model of the engine. On that. On backwards a bit here. Right. Okay. So hopefully the Brimlow and fossil forest developments will be a spin-off to other historic sites. What's happening here? Am I going backwards? Oh yeah, I can see what's happening. Okay. Backwards to Christmas. Progress at Brimlow from September 24 to February 2025. Difficult weather conditions before Christmas and the New Year, with heavy rain and temperatures down to -5, have hampered progress. But the foundations of the fossil forest building have been completed. The fossil forest project has been run by Dr. Tim Astrop since 2018. Tim won a Churchill Scholarship that enabled him to visit Nova Scotia to see another fossil forest and to Arizona to see the digs for dinosaurs, which attract more attention than plant life. Training of more archaeologists for Brimlow has already begun. In September 2024, the contractors began work on the machine shop, which will be the main engine room on the site and will include a cafe. At the start, this building had to have asbestos and lead paint removed. Also, the windows had to be replaced and a new roof fitted due to leaks. The building still contains the original 7.5-ton crane from its machine shop days. The pattern shop is to be renovated and used to tell the story of Brimlow, as they call it. The ancient House is a Grade 2 listed building. It is one of a pair of sandstone cottages that overlook the site. The cottage was built after 1808, but now needs a new roof as well as a complete renovation. Future development of the 440-acre site will eventually link the villages of Brimbo and Tanifron with houses and a community centre. Holland's Head Ironworks are a bit close to home here, near Snedd's Hill. Wilkinson was a partial partner of the Snedd's Hill Coal Company in 1777 and then proposed a blast furnace. 2 furnaces were built by 1779, first iron sales by 1780. From Snedd's Hill, Wilkinson supplied 4,500 tonnes of pig iron to Bersham, 12,500 tonnes to Braidley, another 1,000 tonnes to the Knight family forges in the Black Country, as well as others. They made iron floor plates, rails, ballast bars for heavy industrial premises, including the copper industry, such as Thomas Williams and Charles Rose Harris mine.
Richard, it's Holland's Wood.
Oh, right, okay. Thank you for that. Do you want to fix it now? Yeah. Hadley Ironworks was Wilkinson's 7th ironworks. It had coal mines, iron ore mines, 7 steam engines, 2 blast furnaces. On at least one of these furnaces, Wilkinson was experimenting with hot blast. That is, air was heated from a heat exchanger as it was blown into the furnace. And the heat exchanger was heated by the exhaust gases. 2 benefits of these exchanges are they enable higher temperatures to be achieved at lower cost, because the heat of the exhaust gases is being saved by recycling the heat in them. Heat exchangers are a very important development because they reduce costs and enable higher temperatures more quickly. Heat exchangers are widely used today, for example, in central heating gas boilers, which now claim to be around an incredible 98% efficient. Also, they are used in jet engines, air conditioning, refrigerators, car radiators, and heaters. They exchange heat between 2 fluids without mixing them. In order to achieve this, Wilkinson had to develop flexible iron pipes to fit into the tuyeres because the heat was too much for the usual leather pipes. Tuyeres are the nozzles that are positioned around the circumference of the blast furnace, just above the molten metal, and tap hole for the molten metal. They are the entry ports for the air blast for a blast furnace. Regarding our domestic condensing boilers, the heat exchanger reduces the temperature of the exhaust gases to close on 100 degrees centigrade before they leave the boiler, so you see get a plume of steam from the exhaust gases as they leave the boiler. Hadley Ironworks and recognition of heat exchanger development. Heat exchanging is something Wilkinson should be recognised for. However, the invention of hot blast for iron furnaces is attributed to James Beaumont Nielsen in 1828, 24 years later, and Albrecht Dirac patented a plate heat exchanger in Germany in 1878. Perhaps Wilkinson had become cautious about patents because it gave others the information to copy his inventions, and it was difficult to protect patents. Yeah. In about 1830, Abraham Darby. Oh, right, here we are. Wilkinson's retirement home, Castle Head, Morecambe Bay, Lindale. This is the back garden, and you can see here is where his monument was, and he was buried originally in 1828. So I was looking to have a tour of the place. This is the side view of Castle Head, Wilkinson's side view of Castle Head, Wilkinson retirement home, which is by the River Winster and on the edge of 500 acres of land that Wilkinson reclaimed from the sea. Looking away from Castle Head, one can see some of the 500 acres of marshland that Wilkinson reclaimed from the sea. To facilitate this, Wilkinson 10-inch patterns for horses' hooves so that they did not sink into the ground, and also special spades. This is Castlehead reclamation, land reclamation in the opposite direction. Tractor there. Cultivation of heathland by Wilkinson, the farmer. Wilkinson converted 135 acres of heathland to agriculture, which provided work and food for his employed workers. Wilkinson was acclaimed for this in 1805 by Sir James Sinclair, Baronet, President of the Board of Agriculture. Some say Wilkinson could have bought good land for the cost of converting the land, but Sir James Sinclair said Wilkinson should be praised for providing men and families with work and food. The conversion was achieved by spreading clay, sand and mould, so he was able to grow a complex rotation of crops such as hay, turnips, barley and potatoes. Trev Dawson is the wife of Frank Dawson, who spent 30 years writing the book John Wilkinson, King of the Ironmasters. Frank died in about 2012 and donated the script to Brody Local History Society to edit and publish, namely David Lake and Neil Clark. Dawson and his friends set up Castlehead Field Centre, which was when they discovered it was the retirement home of Wilkinson, and that inspired Frank to write his book. Bev lives in the cottage in the grounds of Castlehead. Frank Dawson and his book John Wilkinson, King of the Ironmasters, edited by Brody Local History Society, recommended by Adam Hart Davis. Castlehead, this is a bridge over the River Winster. I think there used to be two of those pillars. There's only one there anyway, and that's Fairgate. This is the monument at Lindale, Cumbria. This is me at a 40-foot high, 20-ton cast iron monument to John Wilkinson. It was first erected at Castlehead in 1808. It was moved to this site in Lindale in 1863 by the new owner of Castlehead, Edward Mucklow. Wilkinson was also reburied in his iron coffin under the chancel at St Paul's Church, Lindale. The thing I want you to look at here is this phrase or sentence and read. His life was spent in the action for the benefit of man. I feel this phrase is read harks back to John's upbringing as a Presbyterian Unitarian and them treating business as part of their religion and being socially conscious, which gave them a good, reliable reputation. This is the information board by Frank Dawson and the Brody Local History Society. I think Jill and Neil were involved with. This is a plate on the monument that says it was removed from Castlehead Gardens in June 1863 and re-erected by Edward Mucklow. In 1984, the Parish Council commissioned Dorothea Restoration Engineers to restore John's monument, and the grant was given by the Ministry of Environment. This is St Paul's Church, Lindale, Wilkinson's burial place. Another view. And there was a view over the countryside on the hill. And this is St Paul's Church, Lindale, the inside of it. And you can see here we've got this plaque here, to those, you've probably read it by now, is a plaque to Mary Wilkinson's memorial plaque. He died 2 years before John in 1806. John was eventually reburied on 16th of August 1828 in the vault under the chancel steps. Here his wife's memorial plaque. That was confirmed in 2019 using a magnetic detector. Well, there's the memorial plaque to Wilkinson's second wife, Mary, in St Paul's Church, who died aged 83 in December 1806, 2 years before John. Wilkinson's character, there have been critics of Wilkinson, but in my opinion, he should not be taken too seriously and probably come largely out of envy of Wilkinson's great successes and his Midas touch. Ask any Prime Minister about how people want to knock them off their perch due to their ambitions and their own frustration at lesser success or failure, for example. I heard exactly the same thing being heard on the radio the other day. Lord Dundonald was a critic, but while he was technically competent in coal distillation, he was a financial disaster in business terms, with creditors chasing him around the country. The people must have had great regard for Wilkinson because there cannot be many industrialists for whom a folk song was written in praise of his deeds. The song tells the story, tells the people to drink his health and stinger, and ends, and may Wilkinson's fame blaze 1,000 years hence. He had good relationships with his workforce and introduced pensions for his long-term, well-served employees, perhaps the first to do so, which was pretty remarkable at the time. Wilkinson had a good reputation as an employer. Whenever new works were established, cottages were built to accommodate employees and their families. There was even a Braidley legend that if Braidley Works was to decline after his death, John would come back. So it was. 7 years after his death, thousands of people gathered in Monmore Green, Bilston, expecting to see come by on his grey horse. He became church warden in Broseley and was later elected High Sheriff of Denbighshire. Philanthropist and good brother-in-law. Might recognise someone here. Wilkinson built an iron chapel for the people of Braidley. However, like his Braidley home, Braidley Hall is gone, but today the pulpit is in the Braidley Methodist Chapel. He gave the cast iron copybooks to the school children to write in using skewers and sand because paper was so expensive. So there were schools in the Braidley, schools for children in the 18th century in the Braidley area. This copybook idea went on to be used in other schools. Nonconformist, philanthropist, and good brother-in-law. Wilkinson was a nonconformist Presbyterian who financed and materially supported his brother-in-law, Joseph Priestley of the Lunar Society, who was famous for discovering 10 gases, including oxygen, inventing soda water, but gave the idea away to Schweppes. As an educationalist, anti-slavery campaigner, and free thinker in the Enlightenment period, he helped to found the dissenting group called the Unitarians. Two other notable anti-slavery campaigners of the Lunar Society were Josiah Wedgwood, who used a brooch worn by fashionable ladies with a Negro in chains saying, "Am I not a brother and a man and a brother?" which he saw in an earlier talk. He also circulated 2,000 anti-slavery leaflets. Thomas Day, who was Thomas Day who ignited the slavery debate in 1773 and wrote the poem The Dying Negro. Nonconformist and good brother-in-law. It's been suggested to me that Wilkinson did not care about slavery, but only cared about money. However, as with other nonconformists, he would have been well aware of the iniquity of slavery, but rather than be actively supportive, he supported Priestley financially and materially. Priestley was anti-slavery, so that in that way Wilkinson was empowering Priestley, but delegating the responsibility, because he thought industry did best when government and church did not interfere. Delegating responsibility was something he had to do at every turn to run his empire. He was rather like the conductor of an orchestra, instructing different parts of the orchestra to do what he wanted by encouragement and support. As discussed previously, in spite of his enthusiasm for the Iron Bridge, Wilkinson was extremely busy with all his projects at the time the Iron Bridge was being built, so he was quite happy for Derby 3 to build the bridge. Wilkinson wanted an iron bridge, and Derby 3 was an up-and-coming, ambitious young man who was very keen to do it at knockdown price, as well as having the support of William Reynolds. Non-conformist and social responsibility. Also on Wilkinson's monument, it says his life was spent in the action for the benefit of man, which reflects the sentiments of non-conformists, as quoted by Dr. Chris Upton of Newman University, Birmingham, as follows. Non-conformists were a force for good that treated business as part of their religion and developed a reputation for fair trading. Also, they had strong feelings of social responsibility to improve the lives of the ordinary people. We saw many examples of this in part one. In the Birmingham riots or Priestley riots, it was not just Priestley's house that was burned down, it was also Priestley's New Jerusalem Hall in Newhall Street, 4 chapels, and the houses of 27 dissenters. Also, several businesses were destroyed by the war. Over 3 days of rioting. Consequently, Wilkinson financed Priestley with over £1 million in today's value to move to Pennsylvania. Wilkinson and other members of the society were also at risk from the rioters and had to prepare to defend their property. If Wilkinson and others were not anti-slavery, they would not have wanted to risk their lives and property in this way. All the unrest at the time, especially with the French Revolution as well. Many other dissenters who went to USA, the relatives of the Motts, or the TV presenter Sophie Rayworth on Who Do You Think You Are? They went in search of the American dream, peace, liberty, and plenty, especially for their children. Pennsylvania welcomed Priestley because Pennsylvania had been formed by the Quaker William Penn, and then in 1780, Pennsylvania had been the first American state to ban the import of slaves with the act of gradual abolition of slavery. So it's easy to understand why Wilkinson recommended and financed Priestley to emigrate to Pennsylvania. There were many other non-conformists. However, slavery was not properly banned in America until 1865, compared to 1833 in Britain. This is really this is such a revolution. What I'm going to tell you about now is really quite a revolution in making steel. The great importance of puddling, especially the best process. Really, the puddling process to make wrought iron from pig iron should be mentioned. Pig iron and cast iron were brittle, whereas wrought iron is much tougher. Traditionally, the puddling process is claimed to be by Henry Court around 1780. However, others claim it as well, including Wilkinson, used rollers instead of hammers to squeeze the slag out of the yellow hot wrought iron. The puddling also burnt the excess carbon out of the steel to make it tougher and stronger. This rolling out or forging by hammering refined and greatly improved the grain structure and resulting wrought iron and mild steel, which made it tougher and stronger so it could bend and take shocks. The puddling press was a very hot, arduous process that would take its toll on men's lives, as well as being very expensive, even if it was much cheaper than the earlier methods of bloomeries and crucible iron. The Bessemer process and further developments enabled better quality steel. Okay, the puddling and the Bessemer process. In 1856, Henry Bessemer developed the patented steel converter in Sheffield that had a massive social and economic impact because it converted iron into steel so much more cheaply and quickly. It was a turning point in history that benefited everyone because it reduced the price of steel from around £40 a tonne to £6.50 a tonne. Today, a 400-tonne furnace of iron, think about that, can be converted into steel in only 10 to 20 minutes, compared to hours of hot, grueling work that puddling press took and affected men's lives and longevity. Also, fuel costs were reduced due to the shorter time and the burning of excess carbon and silicon and pig iron, which fueled the furnace as the iron turned into steel. So, not wrong. I thought this was really important stuff. Air's blown into here and through the top, and then the whole thing's tilted to pour the iron out. The Bessemer process and further developments enabled better quality steel to be made on a very large scale. It was necessary for a modern world to make ships, bridges, vehicles, and girders for buildings, e.g. skyscrapers and better railways that were laid everywhere. In 2023, 1.9 billion tonnes of steel were made, compared to 27,000 tonnes in 1750. However, by 1788, iron made with coke had increased from 2,500 tonnes to 54,000 tonnes, while iron made with charcoal decreased from 27,000 to 40,000, maybe a Wilkinson effect. Now, we'll give that a miss then, but that's about other improvements in the process. It's going to use the oxygen instead of air. The incredible benefits of 300 years of Industrial Revolution. It's worth reminding ourselves that before the Industrial Revolution, man lived for many thousands of years with very few changes and improvements. In fact, the Industrial Revolution was even 6,000 years after the first civilization of Sumerians. So without the Industrial Revolution, we'd be spending long hours in manual work, ploughing fields with oxen, wood ploughs, grinding corn, collecting wood, or possibly coal to cook with and keep warm, leaving very little time for fun, no schools, except for the very few. Also cold, damp, drafty houses with no clean water on tap. Our life expectations doubled from around 40 to over 80 years. We might complain about the lack of ambulances, but the best lordly purse to cope for in those days was a horse and cart to take the dead bodies away. Wilkinson brought about many great benefits to Britain and the world, as described, that either enabled or provided major steps forward that also enabled tiny Britain to rule a quarter of the world and command 25% of the world trade. So there's the references, more references. If any of you want to, you can listen to my first talk by Googling John Wilkinson talk by Richard Sells. And this, as everybody see, is the Abraham Darby Monument, which is 13 foot high, and it's at Woodsetton, between Birmingham and Wolverhampton. It also talks about Dudley. I think we ought to have a monument to John Wilkinson as well, including a golden statue, Birmingham Centenary Square, the statues of Bolton, Watt, and Murdoch. Okay, that's Priestley's house, by the way, in Pennsylvania. Okay, that's it. Have you got any questions?
Well, first of all, thank you, Richard. Thank you very much. Have you any questions?
All right, okay.
You mentioned that the canal boats were used for fire.
Who used what?
Canal boats were used for fire.
Fire?
Canal boats were used by using iron.
Oh, yeah.
And were they cast, these canal
I
boats?
don't. I suspect the one at Broseley probably was. But I suspect that maybe they were cold work, they might have work plates and somehow it's Braidley. I don't really know the answer to that, but that's just my guess.
They don't exist now.
No, not that we know of. No. No. Mm. There's various books to read. I mean, one which is probably most entertaining, if I can find it here, is John Wilkinson, Ironmaster, by those who do, by Jen Johnston. This is an interesting and very readable book where the author writes the history of Wilkinson as seen and experienced by various people he knew. It's a light version, but you know, the history seems to be fairly correct. If anybody, there are some leaflets up the front here, and there's also a few of these here which to tell you where to Google on the internet for more details about Wilkinson.
It does surprise some people. Can you hear me at the back? It surprises some people that Wilkinson wasn't a member of the influential Lunar Society, which, as you know, was an influential group of businessmen, industrialists, scientists who met monthly in Birmingham. And members were mostly, Richard has mentioned, people like Priestley, Bolton and Watt. Of course, most of them did live either in or very close to Birmingham. Wilkinson did have a works at Braidley, which wasn't very far, I suppose, from Birmingham. Of course, as Richard says, he had interests everywhere. At South Staffordshire, East Shropshire, North East Wales, Cumbria. So probably wouldn't have had very much time to attend meetings of the Lunar Society. But it is rather surprising to some people he wasn't a member. But of course, neither were some of our famous Shropshire people like Abraham Darby III, Richard and William Reynolds, Maria Botfield. None of those were members of the Lunar Society either. Obviously, they were probably too far away to travel there regularly. But what has been said, Richard, whether you've heard this or not, why wasn't he a member of the Lunacy?
I think actually the reason is he was an extremely busy person, and he was actually, people say he was an associate member, so he did. I think he did attend some meetings. So there's probably letters.
Of course, we don't. There weren't any minutes made at the Lunar Society, so we don't really know very much about their deliberations. But of course, they were very influential. No doubt Wilkinson would have fed information into them.
Because one of those was Joseph Priestley, his brother-in-law,
Oh, yeah.
and he was in constant contact with Bolton and Watts through the engine partnership. So, yeah, I think there was some sort of flow of information there.
Probably communication of ideas, but not actually at the meeting.
But I think when you think about Wilkinson's activities all over the country and abroad and everywhere, is a surprising he couldn't turn up on the monthly meetings at the Lunar Society.
We'll excuse him. Any other questions? Well, if not, we've had a long meeting. Richard, thank you very much. You've certainly given us plenty to think about if we didn't know already. And his legacy is quite amazing, which you've, I think, developed this evening quite a lot. How today's developments, many of them go back to John Wilkinson.
Yeah.
So perhaps that, more than anything, is the message perhaps we take from tonight's talk. And we do look forward, as I said, to your distillation of not just this one, the other two as well, into one long article in our journal. Do you think you can do that for us, Richard?
I'll get the frying pan out, I think, about distillation.
Please do. Well, again, many thank you, Richard. You need some more water. You need something stronger than that, don't you? You need something.
I can't drink alcohol.
Well, you did think of it. You did. Don't know much.
Let me relieve you of this, Richard. There you go. You can breathe easily now.
Still got Alistair somewhere.
How come he was a nonconformist and a church warden? Think about that one. You can't be a church warden and a nonconformist. It wasn't nonconformist, it changed. Like Derby, he became part of the established church because it was convenient for him for his business. Priest was nonconformist, yes.
But he was brought up as well.
Sorry?
He was brought up as well.
He was, yeah, but
like I said,
when money is involved, he goes to the right thing.
we must tell me more about that. Did you like that?
I did.
Oh, good.
Mammoth task. I don't know how you manage it, really.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I should squeeze that extra bit in at the end, but I just thought that what happened to the iron industry with Bessemer and that, it's just sort of like a magical change.
Well, I always think that, your 1.9 billion tons is just. I think when everybody thinks everything's plastic or we're in a post-industrial age, it actually puts it in context. No, we're producing more and more than ever. Yeah. But no, and to put him as you do, as Neil said, the whole thing in context.